After attending 3 back-to-back emergency summits in Brussels, in Belgium, US President Joe Biden has landed in Poland to get a first-hand look at efforts to help refugees fleeing the war-torn country. Biden has arrived in Rzeszów, which is hardly 160 kilometers away from the Ukraine border. After landing, US President met with soldiers from the US Army's 82nd Airborne Division. US soldiers have been stationed there as part of NATO's protection of the alliance's eastern flank. While addressing the US soldiers, Biden said, and I quote, "You are in the midst of a fight between democracies and oligarchs." Meanwhile, as the Russian-Ukraine war enters day 31st, Moscow continues to bomb key Ukrainian cities, including the capital of Kyiv and Kharkiv.
I spent a lot of time in Ukraine when I was a senator and vice president. I've spoken to the Rada in the days when they, in fact, didn't have what you'd call a democracy, and was there in the Maidan when the former leader had to take off and head into Russia. And so, you know, with the Ukrainian people have a lot of backbone. They have a lot of guts, and I'm sure you're observing it. We're in the midst of, and I don't want to sound too philosophic here, but you're in the midst of a fight between democracies and oligarchs.
As Ukraine continues to stand tall and strong in spite of being bloodied and battered, Russian President Vladimir Putin has switched to a new plan. Russia now vows to liberate Donbass as its military defense has said first phase of Ukraine operation was successful. This comes days after Russia had set up a no-fly zone over Ukraine's Donbass. Russians even claim atrocities by Ukrainian government and the forces in the region. Earlier this month, Putin had even said it had been a difficult decision to invade Ukraine. Donbass is crucial as Russia-backed separatists now control 93% of Ukraine's Luhansk region and 54% of Donetsk, the two areas that make up Donbass.
Вы знаете, что я сейчас скажу? Может быть, это жестко так прозвучит, прямо от меня в голову пришло, но тем не менее, ситуация заставляет говорить такие вещи. Ну вот вы сами видите, когда у нас то в одном, то в другом регионе, значит, бродячие собаки набрасываются на людей, ранят, даже есть и летальные случаи. А потом, это отдельная проблема, и местные власти должны этим заниматься, а потом мы видим, когда начинают травить этих животных, убивать их, расстреливать. Послушайте, но люди не на Донбассе, это не бродячие собаки. От 13 до 14 тысяч человек убили за это время.
On-border train from Moscow to the border town of Rostov. Snow over here melting in the regions outside of Moscow. It is cold, but it is not very cold. The trains over here very comfortable, warm. But what we are going to show you is not just life in cities, but also life in the border towns. They look very different if you see not the kind of structure, the high-rise buildings that you see in Moscow. The flora, fauna, and the structure of the entire town is going to look very different when we reach the border towns. Although, yes, very European in their way of life, in the way they live. We will show you that, but again, there are reports of supply shortages in border towns. Let's go there and see whether that's the case or not. And also tensions. Tensions are high in the border towns between of Ukraine and Russia. On the Russian side, there are a lot of people who have families across the border. Also, Ukrainians on the Ukraine side, there are a lot of Russians or people of Russian origin. Many even hold Russian passports. They have families across on this side. So we will speak to them and ask them how they feel about this entire conflict that's ongoing. It has taken a toll not just on the lives of people in Ukraine, but also on how Russia and Ukraine are going to look at each other, the familial ties, the historical ties between each other, and the relationship that people have, the people-to-people connect. So we'll report all about that, but for now, it's a long journey to Rostov, which is a border town, and from there to really the border between Russia and Ukraine, which is the Donbass region of Ukraine. So we'll report from there as well. With video journalist Satya Rautre on board a train from Moscow to Rostov. Geeta Mohan for India Today.
Well, hours after President Putin put his nuclear forces on state of alert, several Russian submarines capable of carrying 16 ballistic missiles each have sailed into the North Atlantic. Tracked by Western militaries, the decision to send the submarines closer to European shores was seen by the British Navy chiefs as posturing and a warning rather than an actual threat. They returned towards Russia shortly afterwards and normal levels of activity resumed. Since then, Western intelligence agencies have kept a closer eye on Kremlin's nuclear arsenal, while Russia's use of strategic nuclear weapons of the sort carried by the submarines is still viewed by most observers as unthinkable. Some analysts envisage a scenario in which shorter-range, lower-yield tactical nuclear missiles. Well, this is not the first time that Putin has hinted at using nuclear power against Ukraine. After the Russian troops invaded Ukraine, Putin on February 28 had claimed that he had asked Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. Russian troops had also attacked premises of Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and attempts were made to capture Chernobyl power plant as well. Yet another nuclear threat by Putin in the ongoing war against Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson has said that if existence is threatened, they may resort to nuke attacks. Earlier, Putin had asked Russia's nuclear forces to be on high alert. Here's more.
Relentless onslaught on Ukraine. Ravaged cities, hundreds of casualties, but not much headway in winning the war. With its Ukraine offensive sputtering, Russia came out with yet another brazen nuclear threat, daring the West using its enormous nuclear stockpile. Refusing to rule out use of nuclear power, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov asserted that Russia would only use nuclear weapons in context of the ongoing war in Ukraine if there was an existential threat. He said Russia has a concept of domestic security and it's public, and that the reasons for nuclear arms to be used was there for everyone to see. While existential threat can mean anything Putin deems fit, this is not the first time Russia has flexed muscle and hinted at a nuclear attack. On February 28, Putin asked his defense forces to put nuclear deterrence on high alert.
Приказываю министру обороны и начальнику генерального штаба перевести силы сдерживания российской армии в особый режим несения боевого дежурства.
Putin has also shown eagerness to capture Ukrainian nuke plants, evident from his attacks on premises of Zaporizhzhia plant and destruction of a Chernobyl lab. But what's forcing Russia to resort to nuke threats? Is Putin merely flexing his nuclear muscle, or is it dangerous brinkmanship after failure to win the war, even 4 weeks into the invasion? With Geeta Mohan in Moscow, Bureau Report, India Today.
Exactly 31 days ago, Vladimir Putin launched what he called a special operation to denazify Ukraine. A month on, Kyiv hasn't fallen. Russian military has been bogged down and a new Cold War has been triggered. Ukrainian cities now resemble ghost towns. The world is watching and asking, when will this war end and how?
"30 days of destruction. 30 days since Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Innocent lives lost and an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. 1 month since the war in Eastern Europe began, it shows no signs of slowing down. On February 24, Russian President Vladimir Putin, in an early morning televised address, announced a special military operation in Ukraine with an aim to demilitarize and denazify the country.
прямо над хатами.
The first city to bear the brunt of Russian aggression was the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, located just about 75 kilometers south of Belarus.
We're all the citizens of a beautiful country, and we are fighting for our freedom. We're defending our freedom. Be prepared to protect your country on the squares of your cities and towns.
Thousands of civilians enlisted in the armed forces to fight for their motherland. From making concoctions of Molotov cocktails to direct confrontation with Russian tanks, and even abuses hurled to Russian soldiers' faces. Ukraine's common citizen showed indomitable grit and determination to protect their soil. Russian troops had already deployed missiles and launched air raids on Ukraine's military stations, even targeting civilian structures. As Putin and his coterie dangled the nuke threat, Russian troops captured the Chernobyl nuclear plant in northern Ukraine, the site of one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history. On March 1, satellite imagery showed a Russian military convoy closing in on Ukraine. Russia's onslaught continued as several rounds of talks failed between the two sides. Kharkiv was the worst impacted by the attacks, where shelling and missile rains changed the face of the city completely. Pressure also began to increase on the port city of Mariupol in the east and Kherson in the south, which was snatched by the Russians on March 2nd. Days later, Russia expanded its attack into western Ukraine, launching several deadly missile strikes on the military base in Yavoriv. Despite Russian forces continuing to lay siege on Mariupol, Ukraine on March 21 refused to accept a Russian ultimatum to surrender the port city. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stood up to the Russian might, he has made some climb downs too, laying groundwork for a possible truce in future. He has accepted that his country will not join NATO, one of the key demands of Putin.
Що ви цінуєте? Але НАТО ще належить показати, що Альянс може зробити для порятунку людей, показати, що це дійсно найпотужніше оборонне об'єднання в світі. І світ чекає. І Україна дуже чекає. Чекає реальних дій, реальних гарантій безпеки.
With each passing hour, Ukraine war is becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.